back to Alphos Sweete, a life and Lorcana podcast. I'm Alphos. I'm joined by Sweete.
Hi
Mate, you
guys.
want to introduce yourself again for anyone new?
Hello, anyone new? Yeah, we talk about Lorcana and life, I guess, really.
Yeah, which we haven't talked about life much yet, but actually, considering it's just been Christmas, New Year's, maybe we'll start off with that and then we'll get into Lorcana stuff after. So firstly, I just want to say, I hope all of you had a good Christmas or New Year's, whether you spent it with friends or family, or maybe you're just playing some games at home. I hope it was a nice little break from the day-to-day of work or school. As for me, I would say Christmas itself, Christmas Day, spend with family, which was quite nice. Christmas Eve was a little bit of time to myself, and then New Year's I got to spend with all my friends, which was a great time. Especially, with we had a nice little bonfire, so I much prefer New Zealand New Year's because it's summer, you're on the beach, you're barbecuing, and a bit more exciting. Winter Christmas is better. Yeah, winter and New Year's, you just kind of stay inside. It's not as fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I had the same really. Just sort of saw family over it, watched the new Wallace and Gromit because I'm British and that's like a big moment in me in my life for some reason. Got to see friends and family. Yeah, no, it was a great time. Didn't get to play too much Lorcana, but I noticed all the locals were still running like during that winter break, which I thought was like quite crazy. But yeah, just a nice chill one for me.
Yeah, it's nice to have a little bit of community over winter break. That's the people you like to normally hang out with. Nice to have a card game night during the break.
Yeah, and
It's interesting you bring up Wallace and Gromit though, because I found out something this morning actually that South Korea is really obsessed with Gromit as a
I
character.
saw
There's a lot
that.
of Gromit merchandise, but they don't watch Wallace and Gromit.
No, I saw that. I saw that they had like loads of where they did like the souvenir stalls, and they're all
Yeah, yeah,
selling
yeah.
like
There's like
loads of
20 Gromits.
yeah, which is the better character of the
Crazy.
two. But yeah, no,
Oh yeah. Apparently they really like Shaun the Sheep too.
yeah,
But yeah, I've sent a message to my South Korean friend asking if it's true, if Korea really is obsessed with Gromit without watching the show, because as someone living in the UK, I'm keen to know.
yeah. There's also I didn't know if anyone else outside the UK knows, but in the UK on Christmas Day we have something called the King's Speech, which is I don't know if you watched that at all. But they used to do
No.
it with the. I didn't think you did. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a
No way.
royalist, but like, it's really weird. Like, they used to do it with the Queen, of course, and they'll do like this 5 minute video where like the king or queen, whoever's ruling the country at that point, will go like, "Oh, I'll talk to my subjects and stuff," and do like a little rousing speech. And we always watch it every year. But I kind of this year was like,
It sounds like the Hunger Games.
yeah, it was like I kind of had that like existential crisis of what really is this? Why do I do this? Like I don't have an allegiance to this king. Like this is so strange.
This is no king of
Yeah,
mine.
I used to really like the Queen. I was like a lot of British people
Yeah.
did, but like the King, I've just been like, I don't. Why do I watch this? This is so weird.
The king's quite controversial, isn't he? He's done a few bad things in his past.
Yeah, I think we just had Lizzie, old Lizzie, for so long that everyone
Yeah,
just
I liked Lizzie because the way you referred to Lizzie, it wasn't Queen Elizabeth, it was Lizzie.
yeah.
Like my nan, down the road.
Yeah, she was like everyone's gran or something like that. She'd look after you. But with the
Yeah.
King, no one's really felt the same. And I've kind of been like, why do I watch this every year? Like, this is so weird.
Yeah, the king's more like the creepy uncle we don't really want at the family
Yeah,
gathering. He's just sort of there because he's family.
yeah, but it's the thing we do every year.
Actually, by the way, I love all my uncles. I don't have a creepy uncle. Just to
In case they click on this
just
video.
just to disclose,
Yeah.
my uncles are great. Yeah, all right. Well, I think for the Life and Lorcana podcast, that's it about life. Let's get into the fun stuff. The card game.
Card games,
Uh,
yeah.
Yeah. So for Lorcana, it is an exciting week. This episode should be releasing on Friday, which will be the first day of both the Set 6 Azurite Sea Set Championships and the North American Last Chance Qualifier. Going into the 11th, 12th, Saturday and Sunday, our NA Continentals.
Ooh, the first
yeah.
week of Step Champs is the next week.
Oh, is
Yeah,
it? Oh, my bad.
yeah. It's the 18th. Yeah.
Okay, well, getting ready for set champs, but for that first weekend to prepare yourself for set
Yeah.
champs, you get to see what happens at the NA Continentals. And if you want to prepare yourself for NA Continentals and LCQ, this is the place to be, because today we're going to be making a tier list of the 2025 Lorcana meta. So, shall we get right into that?
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to.
All right. I'm switching.
Smooth transition.
Whoa, here we
Oh
are.
wow, look at
Oh,
that.
brilliant. Boom. Editor, sparkle effects, please. If we actually get that, that'd be crazy. They do not. They
Yeah.
do not get paid enough to put in sparkling effects in
No, they don't. They really don't. They really don't, do they? But I'd love it.
All right, I'm going to have to move my OBS out of the way because I'm thoroughly unprepared. And here we go. So, for the tier list, basically, I'm going to explain the tiers for us here. We've got meta, which is like, these are the decks we expect to do well and possibly win, right? Rogue is off-meta picks, but if you pilot really well and predict the meta well enough that you're countering the top picks, you could probably still make it to top cut and maybe even win, right? So, but just because a rogue deck wins the tournament doesn't necessarily mean it was the best deck for that tournament always, right? Like sometimes it comes down to pilot skill or variance or many other factors. Unplayable is something that is technically a competitive deck, but I would never bring it to the tournament, right? Because it's just there's so many better options. And then fun decks are decks we just don't consider to be in consideration for the meta whatsoever. So we consider them unconsidered, right? Nice little oxymoron.
Mm.
How do you feel? Good tiers, Harlan?
Yeah, I think it's good, and I always put that sort of caveat over when you do these sort of tier lists and look at these, like the decks we're going to put and where we're going to put them is if we put, say, I'm just going to, just from looking at the screen, we put Ruby Sapphire right at the top, the best deck. That doesn't make you the best Ruby Sapphire deck or the best Ruby Sapphire player, or that the deck that you should bring. I mean, if you're just a very comfortable player on another list, do that. Or you just, it's sometimes playing something is a lot better than playing something that you just think is really good.
Or you can just be like me and
So
play any deck and do well.
yeah, you can do. I mean, yeah. So there's two very different players right now. One who will pick a deck for the event and very much practice it, and then you've got me who only does Sapphire Steel.
So we've got both
you know,
sides of a coin here. We have both opinions, of the Lorcana community
yeah,
and deck choice. I mean, I think some are luckier than others. If you're like Harlan and you pick Sapphire Steel, you're stuck trying to push a boulder up a hill like Sisyphus. But if you're like, no, I'm not, and you've picked Ruby Amethyst, then every single meta it's been a good deck to bring. It might not always be the best deck, but it's always viable.
I'd argue Ruby Amethyst. If you're a Ruby Amethyst main, you've had a better time with Lorcana than a Sapphire Steel main. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But
and if you're like an Amber Amethyst main, you just love rolling dice. You're here for pure gambling.
yeah, I'd say that. But then Sapphire Steel have a better chance than a handful of other decks as well.
Oh yeah.
And if you're just a better pilot on Sapphire Steel than you would be on Ruby Amethyst, well, Ruby Amethyst might be the better pick, but you play Sapphire Steel better.
Yeah.
So maybe that is a better choice for you. There's all those things like that. It's so all of this, take everything with a grain of salt, as we say.
And the downside of being a flex player like me is that if I bring a deck that I think's best for the tournament, I might be losing the mirror against people who main that deck because they know all the ins and outs, all the intricacies, but I can't pick up in like 2 weeks.
That is always something I found really interesting of Lorcana, because it's a 2-color combo game where you pick 2 colors and the decks do change. Like Ruby Amethyst has changed this set, but let's be honest, the core is the same. And if you've got No I'm Not, who's just done a million mirrors, and the only difference in this set is now we mirror but with a genie and a bell. He's still going to know how to do that a lot better than you are if you've picked it up and you got a handful of games on it. Exactly. So yeah, all of that stuff compared to other TCGs where it's like you might just have a completely new deck, like Pokemon and One Piece. They're two I play, where it's like, okay, and now the whole deck is completely new because it's a new Pokemon or a new One Piece character.
Yeah, because
this game isn't that.
The leader-focused games sort of centered around like a key card, whereas Lorcana and Magic are more about like the amalgamation of many cards. In concordance with. Right, continuing on, we had a short break there. First pick. So I'm just going to go from left to right in no order of importance. We have Ruby Amber, which I'm not putting in the meta tier, but I'm.
I thought we were going to have a really long episode where we're just debating things for a while.
No, so the most common color combo to play with Ruby Amber is Red Fusser, and this is a deck that's always had a degree of viability, but has probably never been a good pick. Like the only person who's really done well with it, I think, is in those early online tournaments, Humble, who was essentially a master of deck. I think I'd put it into unplayable. Like, I just don't think it has space in a steel meta. And it's also just like, it's a very fair deck. Like, Mufasa's too fair
Mm.
with the amount of removal
Yeah, I think so. Humble's the like content creator, like people know when they think of Red Fassa, and if you didn't, he's the guy. There was one called Pandemonium Heart who also went to Yellow Green, and I believe even made cut at a DLC with the deck.
Oh, yeah, I've talked to him about
Um,
Yellow Green.
yeah, so Red, he was a Red Fassa player for a long time, but as you say, the deck is very one-lined. It's going to play its damaged characters, try and heal them, and then it's going to play a Gaston or a Dock and try and cheat something out quickly. Now, let's be honest, before Brawl was introduced to the game, that was a pretty good line. It would require like a Pinocchio or like some other answers, but yeah, Steel will just chew through that, and then Red will just brawl it. So it's not great. And as much as they take the comfort picks and stuff like that, like historically, as much as we complain about Sapphire Steel, it has done well. It does top 4 events, it does top 8 events. You know, it can perform well. Red Fasta has historically never performed well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, unless it got some crazy cards this set, which it didn't, it's not jumping up into those tier lists where I think it's worth playing, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you brought Red Fossa, you'd have a chance, maybe a minuscule chance of making top cut,
Mm,
but I just don't see progressing further than that or even having a good conversion rate over. And next up is
mm.
quite the opposite of deck. We have Amber Steel. Now, Amber Steel is probably the hot topic going into NA Continentals. It's the deck that I think everyone is predicting to be the best deck, the deck to beat, which does bring in some interesting meta changes. Essentially, a well-known player, Decandio, uh, did they win the CCS with it? Yeah, with the Dwarf Mines version.
Yeah, they went on to win it. They beat
Yeah,
No I'm Not in quite a confident game, and then they beat Ruby Sapphire as well, which
yeah. So
should be a hard matchup.
beating Ruby Sapphire traditionally a hard matchup, but these days with Daisy Ducks, it's not as cut and dry as it used to be. So Ruby Sapphire has to play a bit differently and build a bit differently in order to beat Amber Steel consistently, like running more Sisus, for example, which I think they will do in a meta like this, where we're so low to the ground and everyone's running Dock, Dwarf Mines, lots of small characters. I think we're going to see Ruby Sapphire shift more towards the kind of list I played, where we're high on Icebox, high on Sisu. In that case, it is counterable, right? But it probably will be the most represented deck in Top Cut still. But I think it might not win it because of that possibilities would be counted. But I'd still place it as the best deck in the meta, which is why we're putting it at the top of the meta tier. What do you think? Good placement?
Y- Yeah, I mean, arguably, Amber Steel, on paper, when it works and does what it needs to do, is just the best deck. Like, value, singing is insane value. The characters, the questing, Daisy cards like that are amazing. If we do look at the EU Continentals, I think actually one made it in the top 16.
Hmm.
So it can have a very bad day where it doesn't run very well.
Well, I think that's because EU
That
Continentals was just chock full of red blue, which is probably
yeah,
one its worst matchup in the top decks.
there was loads of reasons why it didn't have a good conversion rate. That doesn't, that, as we say, like just because it didn't doesn't mean it's a bad deck or it's not the deck to play. It still most definitely can be. And with this new Doc Mines build, I mean, I've played that in testing. Sometimes when it works, it just thinks like fundamentally, there's no reason why you shouldn't be playing this. Like
And I
it's
think the
so good.
landscape has changed a lot in EU Continentals. Because in EU
Mm,
Continentals, red blue was dominant, right? And that was responding to green steel and amber steel and purple steel and green purple being very popular. Well, not really so much green purple, but being very popular in the LCQ, right? So what we're going to see going into LCQ is probably a reaction to the meta based on the more notable tournaments like the CCS, like EU Continentals. And so because EU
mm,
Continentals was won by Ruby Amethyst and was represented by a lot of green purple and some purple steel, I think we're going to see a lot of Amethyst decks, which Amber Steel is good at beating. It's going to make people bring Amber Steel, going to make people bring a bit of Emerald Steel too. So the real question is, how do you counter that? So I think for LCQ, Amber Steel is probably going to be the most populated deck, but then for the NA Continentals, it might respond to that and circle back to red blue, which would be really funny if we ended up with a high proportion of red blue again in NA Continental. I would not be surprised if red blue won NA Continental, to be honest. If we
yeah.
really do see Amber Steel being so dominant.
Yeah, you do have those players that have already qualified that will take in everything that happens in the LCQ, and the ones that do qualify as well,
Hmm.
and think, well, we just saw a load of this. It was lucky I made it through. Maybe I need to switch up. But then sometimes those reactions can be wrong because if everyone's having those reactions,
Then it
then
goes one step
yeah,
further, which is very likely to
yeah, and
happen with a small group of high caliber players who are all talking to each other. Like the meta gets homogenous. I was going to use a different word for it, but homogenous is a good word for it in the sense that there's less diversity because there's so many less players met all in contact with each other and giving their thoughts on
mm,
what they think the meta should be. Like I think Zan said at one point, I don't know if it was on a podcast or from when I was talking to him, but Zan said at one point like you could literally like be bringing one deck to the tournament, and then in the morning in the lobby, an hour before deck sign up, you hear some top players talking about the meta and think, oh, maybe it's shifting this way. I should get one step ahead. So if you are a
yeah.
flex player, I think that kind of like social analysis and like just data analysis of previous tournaments is integral to you doing well, making the correct pick.
But if you're a hardcore loyalist
And
like
it
I am,
doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter. None of this makes any sense. So
Yeah, it's only
you
tech
just
cards.
play the deck you. Yeah.
All right, well, we've talked a lot about Armor Steel and a bit about future decks. We'll circle back to those in detail. But next up, we have Emerald Sapphire. This was super hyped up at the start of the set. I think it's terrible, but not quite fun. It's an unplayable deck.
I think it's
I
terrible.
think people overhype it too much. It's too easily counted. It takes a while to set up. And just, yeah, the meta's so fast, I don't see where you're getting with a late game value deck like this that doesn't have a lot of control.
Yeah, I know people who enjoy this deck, and I've tested with them as well. And whenever I talk to them about it, it can either perform really well against Steel Song or really good against Ruby Sapphire. So you can either do low to the ground or top end, but the way you build it, because you can go heavy on the muses, and you can do like John Silver, the green one, or you can do like top end stuff like Mother Knows Best, your welcomes and stuff like that to keep Tamatoas and things like that down. But you can't do both. It seems the deck can't do both. It can also brick its Sapphire deck. It just arguably doesn't seem the best reason why you'd pick it. I think it's decent. There was a gentleman in the LCQ, the EU Continentals, that got to round 4 with it and then fell flat because his build was very good versus low to the ground decks, but his last round was Ruby Sapphire,
Yeah.
so he lost that. Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe I'd be opposed to saying you could put it in the fun category, but it also is. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to debate what is fun and unplayable because something can be fun and unplayable.
I think if you think there's a chance it could ever make top cut, it's an unplayable, and if you think it literally never could,
Oh, okay then. Yeah, so I'd put it in unplayable. I think it has a chance. It needs on top of the luck that you get from TCGs, it needs a very good day. But it's doable. Yeah, for sure.
All right, next we have Harlan's favorite, Sapphire Steel.
Fun. Yeah, I'll put it in fun. I don't have fun when I play it anymore. I don't even know why I play it.
You're
I
just a
just
blue
do.
steel guy, Sapphire Steel guy. You have to
Yeah,
stick.
that's my whole thing.
But yeah,
Yeah.
as fun as it would be to say it's terrible and it's just in fun tier, I think it's a rogue deck. It's just one of the worst rogue decks. I would put it above these unplayable decks because I definitely think we'll see Sapphire Steel in the NA Continentals. It's just going to be like one guy or two guys, and they're going to be Sapphire Steel mains. Like they've always played Sapphire Steel.
Yeah, so I mean, going off top of it, R&B and Sky will be there. I'm not telling you what they're
Is
playing,
Lamb
but
Chops there?
I Lamb will be there as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yeah, so
So that
so
might
you've
be
already got
two
like
to
three,
three, 2 to 3 seconds.
and there's I know a few as well that in the LCQ that like die hard, so like 24k, and like loads of it. So I reckon it sometimes nabs like a 5% meta share.
Hmm.
Um, People are very hardcore on it. It does technically have a lot of lines, which makes it feels like it's very good. Sometimes all those lines are terrible, but it does have them. Yeah, I think at this point I would drop it down from. I mean, it is a meta deck, but it's, as I've stated before, it's a tier 2 deck that can be a tier 1.5 if you're good enough. Um, and you get those benefits of not a lot of people practice into it. I think it has a really good game into Green Steel if
Hmm.
Green Steel like pops off again and goes up again.
It's a
So it
decent
does
game
need
into
to
Amber Steel.
decent into Amber Steel, I think, and you can always tech and build it. I did get a lot of tools with some Jim Hawkins cards. Yeah, it's not top tier meta, but as we've seen in every event prior to this, it's always there. It always does relatively well. It's done worse in the last couple sets, but it can always make a cut. I think that's where it would go.
I think if you're building Blue Steel, you either beat it to beat Amethyst or you beat it to beat the low to ground steel. It's like Green Steel, Amber Steel. and you sort of just have to make that choice. Like, which do you think you're going to see more? I think LCQ,
Yeah.
you'd maybe build it towards Amethyst, and then Continentals, you'd build it towards Steel.
Yeah, this is sort of the not the issue, but the thing with Sapphire Steel. It's a deck that likes to react, especially not the one I brought to the EU
No, definitely
Continentals,
not
but
your
the
one.
standard, the standard sort of wheel and no wheel builds. It needs to react to the meta, and in previous sets, like set 3 and 4, it was like I just need to react to Ruby Amethyst and like Bucky. But now the meta's so wide, it's like not just Steel Song, it's Doc Mines as well, you know. And then you've got Ruby Sapphire, then you've got all these different decks, and it's like I don't know which way to go, so I have to build it for the event, which makes it a bit harder to build. So I definitely think it's a rogue pick. I know a lot that are very confident they're going to win the whole thing with it, but Sapphire Steel players are always very
Always
confident,
very
and
confident.
it's never won a DLC. So
Coming from two
yeah,
Sapphire Seal players, always very confident.
yeah, it's always very confident. To be honest with you, on paper, sometimes it does feel like you're just going to win it, and then it's very hard to get those wins over
I
7
think I think
rounds
the
or
only
9
meta
rounds.
where I felt like I could literally win any matchup was bringing No Wheel to the Seattle meta. I think that was like peak Sapphire. That's the best it's ever.
I think during the yeah, Green Steel's quite popular there, and the Bucky times, that's where it, because I did a video on this during the Bucky era, even the Toronto event where Bucky wasn't in it, it performed the best during that time. That
Mm.
seems to be like on paper where it peaked, but I think that No Will one did get looked over because you, Moyen, and Sky, like yeah, all did quite well with it, and it was just a really good list. So I think it always has that in it. Like people might crack it and build it. I saw like Justin Morales was winning like loads of events in his area in the Netherlands. So yeah, it's still going to be around. It probably is rogue if the way we're labeling it, that's where it deserves to be.
It's funny when you have a low player count playing a deck though, because if me, Sky, and Moyen were the only ones bringing the deck to that tournament, getting like two top 128 and one top 64 is like really good for a deck if
Yeah,
100% of the deck list is done.
and Justin, not Justin Morales, another one. He made cut with it.
Was it No
I think
Wheel or Whole New World? I'm
a
talking
wheel
specifically
version.
about No Wheel because there was a lot of just
Oh,
people
oh,
playing Whole New World in general.
yeah. I mean I mean, even in Italy, he performed quite well with it. I sadly, it didn't feel like it was good into a lot of the steel song. I played 6 steel song, and he played like 3 green steel, and I was like, you lucky lad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's good. It can always be built. Like someone's going to crack it, and they're diehard fans of the deck. So definitely you're going to see it represented.
All right, and moving on, we have everyone's recent favorite, Lurple. How good do we think it is?
Mm, it's it's been given the name the Purple Killer, um, because a lot of like Ruby Amethyst players and anyone who's playing a purple deck says Blurple beats them. Um, I don't know how true that is. I have watched it play in different testing sites, and it does seem very strong.
Mm.
Mainly because I'm going to play a genie on turn 3, and you're not. And then I'm going to basically get to the top end and do more things than you, and I'm still doing all the purple things you do. But into Steel Song, it's pretty rough. Like every singer's going to be able to sing.
And
And
traditionally, it used to beat Red Blue, but actually, Red Blue I think beats it now.
oh, it's because it's not sapphiring as good as them.
Yeah, and
It's
it's
not
getting
aggroing as
Sisu'd
good.
very efficiently with Ice Cubes
Yeah,
and Sisu.
it's because it can't full aggro because it needs to take a little bit of steam off to ramp. It can't sapphire as good as them because its top end is not as good. Like if you're Elsering a Tamatawa, like what's that doing for you? Like that's not doing anything. The Hades is alright, but it's not that great. So yeah, I think it in a wide meta spread it doesn't do good, but into purple matchups, yeah, it's
Yeah,
quite
maybe
performs
it would
well.
shine best in Continentals if you had a read on the meta being Amethyst. I mean, you could say, well, I'm going to
Hmm.
bring the Amethyst killer.
If like the room was 2/3 like ruby amethyst and green, emerald amethyst and maybe some amethyst steel, I'd be like, yeah, purple, take that, you know.
Yeah.
And then, but I think in your LCQ where you can't afford a loss, you'd be like, oh, well, how did you lose? I played a steel song in round
Oh,
two.
yeah, I would
It's
not
like
bring it to
that's the reason you
LCQ.
lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That it can't be like the reason you lost is that you knew that your deck lost to this other deck that's very popular and you brought it anyway. But in like 7 rounds, you can maybe split one of them and then get your 2-0s into the Amethyst matchups, maybe.
I mean, I think I would not be shocked if Blurple day 2'd NA Continentals
No,
as long as the conditions were correct, right? If there's a lot of
yeah,
Amber Steel, I think there might be. Maybe the conditions aren't. But also the problem is, I think if there is a lot of Amber Steel, there's going to be a lot of people picking red blue to counterpick it, unless no one's just reading the meta correctly, in which case it's going to struggle into red blue.
Yeah.
So it's a tough call.
You might end up like getting him in an interview afterwards, or whoever like qualifies. It's like, how would you get top 16? It's like, I played 6 Ruby Amethyst today, and it will be like, oh yeah, that's all you needed, didn't it?
Yeah.
And then
and they get first seed off it.
yeah. I mean, that could happen. There's no reason why that couldn't happen.
And then they get
so,
knocked out going first into Amber Steel in like first round of day 2 and don't qualify. Like that would, I could see that happening. That could be the Blurple story. Yeah.
If Blurple makes cut, there's no way you interview them and they go, yeah, I had a very even spread, a lot of Steel Song. No, it'll be like, I played a lot of other Amethyst decks.
But I think these kinds of very polarizing decks are especially good for these small player count events, because if you get a really good read on the meta, you can pick the polarizing deck that just gets you wins, even if your draws are bad and even if your luck's not great, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Alright, and next up we have Zan's favorite, Emerald Steel. Where do we put it? I actually can't remember where we put it. I need to open up.
We haven't done this. Is all done on the fly.
No, it's done on the fly. We definitely didn't pre-talk about which one would probably be good.
I mean, I think we had to have put it meta, unless I'm wrong there.
Oh yeah, I had to scroll up. No, I don't think it's meta. I think it's rogue.
Okay. Well, I mean, we went through this. Discuss. I don't know why I'm surprised because we've done this before.
Well, let's disagree then. So, the reason I don't think this is quite a meta pick is because the amount of players who can build the correct list, pilot the correct list for the meta, are in like single digits. People I can think. I don't think your average player can pick up the list and qualify. Like they have to build it specifically for the meta they read and pilot it really, really. It's like more like Sapphire Steel in that regard. Like you have to read the meta and you have to be one of the best at the deck. Like it's not in the position anymore where it's just flat out beat something.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that because you went from it being the Bucky deck where it was like just play Bucky and then play Floodborns and you'd win. Then you went from Diablo Shift was so strong that you just Diablo Shift discard and you'd win. It's not that anymore. It's like everyone can answer Diablo quite effectively. There's no Bucky around. You do have to be very good on it. You have to know your lines. And not just Zan, like I know Dale as well. Ray is someone I test with. Like loads of people, they do really well in all their environments where they keep playing green steel. Of course, discard is in TCGs, drawing cards and having cards in your hand is very strong. So of course decks that say I'm going to make sure you don't have cards in your hand always perform very well. So it has so many positives to it. And there's always that joke that Europe's quite popular on Emerald Amethyst and NA is very popular on Green Steel or Emerald Steel. So I think we will see a lot of it.
I think we'll see more. I think we'll see more in NA.
Yeah.
But I think it might struggle more into the Continental. Because again, I'm making this prediction, but I think Red Blue will make a comeback for Continentals to counter Steel. Because Steel decks are the very obvious pick to counter the Amethyst, which has already been proven by Decandia with Amber Steel.
Yeah.
So I'd have a tough time bringing it to day 2 unless I'm Zan or I'm Dale and I know I can at least won those red blue matchups by piloting Melon.
Yeah, I guess I would agree that it is rogue because if it was meta we would just be talking about it all the time, but we're not. We're talking about Amber Steel, we're talking about Ruby Sapphire, we're talking about Ruby Amethyst. We're not talking about Green Steel all the time. It's sort of fallen out of favour a bit. But
I think it's the best of the rogue deck. So.
Yeah, I think so. And I think as well, you're going to have a lot of players. At this point, we're in a very high-level TCG game where people take this seriously. There's money on the line. People are going to hide lists. I'm 100% sure there's a lot of Emerald Steel players that have these crazy lists hidden away. We've seen some of these dock build ones that have been like doing very well in smaller tournaments, but yeah, I think Emerald Steel is this like weapon that's going to be shown, and then we all have to play against it in store champs because everyone's going to net deck it.
Also, Emerald Steel, more so than any other deck in the meta, has the most room for adapting meta with tech cards because the core is very small. The core is literally Shift Diablo line. That's probably all you need. There's a few other cards, but the core, you get the point, the core is very small. Compared to, say, Yellow-Green, where your core is like 56 cards and you have 4 flex cards. Like, green steel has a very flexible build position. This is why you saw such a big difference between like the Birmingham, Las Vegas green steel and the Seattle green steel versus the Mines green steel that we saw at E Championships. Like it was half the deck completely changed. Like people cut Prince
Yeah.
Johns. You never thought people would cut Prince Johns. So this is a deck that's very, very flexible for building to the meta.
Oh no, you hit it right on the head there. I was about to say it as well. It's like I'd probably put Ursula, the 3-cost Ursula, in there as well. It's
Oh
like
yeah, yeah.
if you're playing green steel, it's you're gonna play 4x of her. But Prince John, I was like, I thought we kind of got to that point where it has to be 4x again, but people were like 2 copies, and stuff like that. So yeah, the core of that deck is just Diablo's really powerful. I'd say Ursula as well. And then hey, you can discard cards because you play green,
It's like
and then
sudden
you can
chill,
kind of just
hypnotize. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, maybe
and
not even
hypnotize.
hypnotize. Like hypnotize
No,
could be cut.
it's kind of just that base idea that you play green, you can discard people, and you've got steel, so you can do steel removal,
Mhm.
and then run with that. You don't really have to think too hard
As
on
long
it.
as it's
And
singable
yeah,
steel removal. Yeah, like Leopard Storm Ridge on strength. So those are also cool.
yeah,
But yeah. But as you say, compared to most decks where 2/3 of your deck are core,
yeah.
Emerald Steel only like half or a third of the deck.
Oh yeah, like a Sapphire deck where half of it's taken up by Porpsicles and like Hirams and like all
Yeah.
this other stuff. Where yeah, and then Ruby Amethyst is taken up by bounce package stuff. That one is like there's 2 legendaries that are probably really good. Play them, and then have fun with it.
Alright, next up we have the Arda cast's favorite deck. Lorcana deck list and Arda is green purple. Where do we
The
put
Articast.
the Arda?
Uh, did we put it in fun?
No,
No.
no, I'm just doing this to trigger people.
That's
If
clickbait.
if they do like angry comments, you know,
Yeah, take a screenshot
it's
right
good for
now.
engagement. This is the thumbnail now. Green
Yeah,
purple.
yeah. I mean, I think it has to be put in meta. It's just got so many fun cards, so powerful. It doesn't seem as representative as it did at the start of the set. I think people have just got used to it and know how to play around it. But arguably, Go-Go, Genie, Diablo One Drop, all those cards are so strong. Like you can't argue they're bad. So
Yeah, I do think it's still a meta pick, especially because of how well it did in EU Continentals. But I think it's falling behind in the meta, and the meta is progressing past it.
mm,
So I don't think it's quite top of Rogue because it's still a strong pick on its own 2 feet. I think it's very, very bottom meta. Like if there was a tier in between, I'd put it here. It's the very bottom meta. So,
yeah, and of course we did EU Continentals with Artifacts and LD. And whenever I talk to them quite a bit, and they're always like, "Oh yeah, it's a great deck, but it falls to just like steel pile decks."
yeah,
And I was like, "No, no." And then I realized I was playing a steel pile deck that was beating it, and I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah," because it has lots of powerful cards, but they're quite flimsy in what they are. They're very easily can be removed from like a fire the cannons or whatever. So yeah, but I have seen it adapt. It's got Lyles and Crickeys and stuff like that
yeah.
in
The
it.
Lyles are super
Um,
interesting. Yeah,
on my content creator battle, I played against Diego, who won Toronto, and he had Lyles in there, which was like a nice change up for the list. I'd imagine that ruins your Ruby Sapphire um, matchup because you've got this uninkable 3-drop that you can't really use in that matchup. It's just
yeah.
dead weight. But I'd probably get proven wrong when I say
It's
that
good against
because I
Ruby
don't play that deck.
Amethyst. It's good against
Yeah,
the Mirror. It's good against some of the Steel
it's
decks.
good against all these low to the ground, like Steel Song. It must be amazing that card.
Yeah, unless we're just straight
Um,
for Lyle.
yeah,
So I think it's
I think
actually not
also
as strong into the Pride Lands list, which can vary. Not Pride Lands list, the Mines list, which can flood the board very, very easily and pop off the string.
I think it might be like the because you could do like reckless on like a daisy or like something that's going to gain like a piglet
Yeah,
and make them not get that lore, and then you can go forward and stabilize a bit, and then Ursula out the songs or whatever. I think it was cool. I think it adapts, but yeah, I think it's kind of at the bottom of meta right now.
yeah,
It feels like everyone's just reacted to it and be like, oh, this deck's really powerful. Okay, everyone's just gonna play some steel now. Because even as you see this list forming right now, like look, 3 steel decks are kind of taking very high percentage of the meta.
I also don't
So
think
yeah,
it beats red blue consistently enough to be worth playing to counter a possible red blue countering amber steel. Like I think that you've gotten too lost in the sauce if you're trying to like triple bluff like that.
mm, yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's too many
I
meta
don't think.
cycles ahead.
Yeah, I think there are a select group of people who really understand Emerald Amethyst. LD and Artifacts being 2 of them. But for people who are picking up as a meta call for the event, I don't think they'll know sort of the best way to navigate a lot of these matchups, to be honest with
I
you.
mean, I remember talking to Zan in Disneyland, and we're watching the match in the queue for the rides, right? And he's basically rooting for green purple because if green purple wins, it makes the meta a lot softer for decks like amber steel and green steel. But because ruby amethyst won, it shook up the meta a bit more going to NA content.
You watch that in the queue.
Yeah, we're just in the queue for the rides, watching the games. Pretty good.
Yeah, that's nice. That's
Did you,
cute.
did you not see the Twitter image of me and Zan playing against each other in the
I
queue?
saw you guys playing it in the queue. Yeah, that was really cute. I
Yeah.
like that.
All right, and the next deck is right. Purple Steel. Now, this is probably going to be controversial, hurt some opinions for one reason or another. Where do we put it?
Um, the thing I've always had with Purple Steel is never actually won anything, or in my opinion, it's never actually done anything remarkable. And I say that as a Sapphire Steel player who that also hasn't really won anything. But it used to win the Thea events, like Sky used to win the Thea events, and it always top fours, top eights, whatever. It does well. But Purple Steel, I've never actually seen it do anything remarkable. So I would generally put it as Rogue. It seems alright into Emerald Amethyst, and some of these other low to the ground decks
How does it do
because
into Amber
it's
Steel? Do you know the current Mines iteration? I haven't tested that.
I think it's not too bad. I mean, you've got a lot of rush stuff, and you basically flood wide sing strength, and you're drawing like purple draws. So actually, you'll probably draw more consistently than a dock every so often. Um, but yeah, it's like, does it ever really feel that strong to you? It never feels amazing.
No,
Um,
it's always quite a fair deck. Unless we're opening like
yes.
triple Maleficent, it's very, very fair. Especially when I mean, this isn't exactly like the examples of top meta decks that people will be bringing to Continentals to the show match. But when I casted Villain versus Dick Burns from the Forbidden Mountain, it's quite an underwhelming deck. If they, again, Specky's going to be annoyed at me for this, for using this deck as a comparison. It's not necessarily the kind of deck people will bring to the NA Continental. But in many cases, unless you're opening at least double Maleficent, it just doesn't have the a lot of times to punch. Obviously, with
Yeah.
Genies, that's changed. It's a lot more consistent than it was before. And the Jafar was a really interesting tech choice that we saw in day 2 of EU Continentals. I think I'd put it above Sapphire Steel because I think it has better meta conditions, but I maybe still put it below Emerald Steel, which is actually different to how I ranked it when we talked about it before the call. But after talking through it more on this podcast, I think it's a bit below Emerald Steel. But still, I would divide the rogue decks into two halves. Like Emerald Steel, Purple Steel, they're on that tier 1.5, whereas Sapphire Steel and Purple are like proper tier 2.
Yeah, they're proper. They're fine decks.
Yeah.
You know, the tier two ones, they're fine. And if you practice enough, you can get it to that 1.5. And I think the same for the 1.5 decks. If you practice them good enough, like there are tier one green steel players out there. And whenever I talk to, there's a player called JDRR who's like the Emerald Steel guy, like does YouTube and is always in the 20 lore. And whenever I basically give up on Sapphire Steel, I always look at playing Amethyst Steel. And he said, "Oh, you're back again." I want to try it again. And he's always said we play a very, very fair game.
Yeah, why do you keep
We're not
choosing two
discarding.
bad decks to play?
I don't, because it's not far off. But I like Steel.
Yeah.
Um, but he says, yeah, you always play a very, very fair game. Like you're not doing anything broken. You're using steel removal. You're not discarding. Nothing's crazy. So it's a good deck. It can clearly make a day two, but I think it's got so many bad matchups, and it's probably only a rogue meta call at this point,
Yeah,
in my
I'll
opinion.
admit, I think Purple Steel's in a better position than it's ever been in Lorcana, but it's still not tier 1.
Hmm. No, no, it's maybe just fundamentally what the deck does. It maybe won't ever be tier one, but it's never going to be bad. It plays a very consistent draw color purple, and it plays removal, so it could never be bad, but it can never be great in my opinion.
Next up, I think this one might be controversial too. So we have Red Blue, and again, I ranked it lower before talking. But I'm going to make a gambit here and say that my meta prediction of people reacting to Steel in Continentals and Amethyst doing badly, Steel doing pretty well, making Red Blue the best counter pick. I think Red Blue's coming
Ooh,
back for NA Continental. I'd put it above Green Purple.
I mean, it didn't particularly have a bad time. Like Reese got top of Swiss with it, and then
Yeah.
we saw a very unfortunate game on stream where just the deck wasn't doing what the deck needs to do, and that sometimes just happens in TCGs.
Although I wouldn't
Um,
count Reese's deck. It was a very niche
it
version,
was
specifically aimed at the
which
meta for EU content, which is not going
I
to apply to NA.
we did see that deck played though in a few of the streamed events like the SCG and stuff like that over the weekend. So I wouldn't be surprised if people haven't taken their Flynn Sisu combo and everything that Reese was doing and put it into their lists. But
But
if
that
we're
combo
talking
is
about
not good
standard
into
Sisu,
steel, so I wouldn't. I'm going to put this out here. PSA: do not bring Reese's list to NA Continentals. I think you'll have a bad time.
yeah. If we're talking about like Icebox Sisu, I generally don't think that's ever a bad choice. I'm sure there's like
I don't think
people
he was
like
running Ice
Fam.
Block.
He wasn't. No, no. So I'm going over to just
Oh
talking
yeah.
about like general. He was only on 4 Porp with 4 Hirams, which was mad. Um, but yeah, if you go to like, I don't think Sisu Icebox ever going to be bad. Like, it's a lot of uninkables. It's a bit bricky, but fundamentally, it's just an insanely strong control deck.
And just the best way for a control deck to survive in a fast match.
Yeah, and it's moving to the human Sisus, the 3 cost ones. Like, you can play around with Queen of Hearts. Like, Rhea
Yeah,
has been
turn 4
interesting.
shift Sisu with the right.
Yeah, like it's got all the pieces to make it good. It's actually, in a sense, the only real control or hyper control deck in Lorcana. Like, there's nothing else that matches it. So you only have to play the mirrors versus other control decks. So yeah, I don't know why we put it lower when we first.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah, I think we put it lower because it during EU Continentals, it was obvious the meta was moving away from red blue. I think it's now coming
Mm.
back. Like, metas are always cyclical. We're playing this game of very complicated rock paper scissors. We were at scissors, turned out to be paper, and people. No, that's the wrong way around. Turned out to be rock, and now people are playing paper. I think we're coming back to scissors to get rid of the paper.
Yeah.
I think that's where we're at.
I when I talked to, I think it was Erebus when I was in the EU Continentals, and he said, yeah, all the red blue is kind of stuck in the mid tables right now because it was beating Steel Song and a few other decks that it came to the event to beat it,
Hmm.
and then it was losing to Ruby Amethyst and Emerald Amethyst, so it was sort of stuck in this mid table bit where it couldn't go any further than where it was at because it was so tech to beat everyone at the bottom of the tables.
Yeah.
So you had this weird little like meta going on between 96 people.
I also think something else to say about EU Continentals is Red Blue specifically was represented a lot by Team Inkless, and
Mm,
everyone knew Team Inkless's list. Pretty much cut for cut.
yeah.
Which I will say heavily affected it because everyone mulliganed differently the moment they saw that English shirt. Uh, yeah, no slander. I was saying you guys
No.
probably shouldn't have your team tag because I'm friends with a couple of the guys on Team Inkless. I was saying you probably shouldn't have your team tag when playing on Lorcanito. I think it'll come to bite you in the ass, and it very much did. Like I think that
Yeah.
really got them in LCQ, but especially Day 2 content.
I think I was offered to see that list about 3 times, I think, throughout the LCQ. Someone was like, hey, do you want to see the ink list list? Because, like, they noticed that everyone on that team was on the same list and someone had it somehow.
Yeah,
I don't know if they were posting it anywhere or whatever because I didn't know where the source was. But yeah, it was just like, oh, you got an Inkless person. It's this list. Cool. Yeah.
yeah,
Which was and Sailor said the same thing. I think Inkless really changed the numbers on the EU Continentals Red Blue results and turnout. It will be different in NA because they don't have a big team all on Red Blue,
yeah.
all on the
And
same
it'll be a
list.
different version of Red Blue to be more appropriate to the current meta and not
Mm,
the green purple meta they were playing for before, and the
yeah, for sure.
red blue mirror meta. Because I don't think it's going to be a red blue mirror meta. I don't think red blue will be most represented. I just predict that it will be the best deck to counter the steel meta that's countering the amethyst meta. That's
Mm,
my hope if I want to be correct.
yeah,
All right, and we're
that'd be
getting
good.
towards the tail end here. There's not many good decks left to talk about, so let's be quick here. Ruby Emerald, sorry Specky, done. Don't bring this to the
Yeah.
PC. Let-
It can pop off, but it's bad.
Ruby Steel, also terrible. I'm scarred by this deck. I spent 20 hours like set 2 trying to make it good, and I thought it sucked. And I think Steadfast made a weight set video. I tried it, like maybe I was wrong, still thought it sucked. It's just never been a good
The only thing I want to say on Ruby Sapphire, I know we're getting through the like easier ones right now,
Mhm.
is I'll admit Doc right now, the card Doc, has made a Sapphire combo of pretty much any deck.
Hmm.
Because I use that with my Sapphire build, and it's fundamentally, it performs well. It performs at a 60% win rate, which is like just basically means in the TCG the deck is playable as long as it's performing at 60%. And you can do the same thing for Ruby Sapphire. I'm not saying it's good, but
Ruby
you can
Steel,
go
you
like
mean, with Doc?
yeah, if you
Yeah.
just use a Doc build, because you can, play the powerful Ruby cards, refresh with Doc. Doc seems to work in any of these. Like you just pair it with any
Yeah,
color, and it
because it
can
just
work.
lets you
I,
ink freely. Just hope you get a
yeah,
Doc later to draw.
and if you're playing two questers and going wide, you probably will win. I'm not saying Ruby Sapphire with Doc, no, Ruby Steel
Ruby
with Doc
Steel.
works, but yeah, Ruby Steel with Doc works. But I've noticed how powerful Doc is because I've been using it in Sapphire Steel, where it basically can make any color like work and just flood, play Doc, flood, and win the game with two questers.
Yeah, I think I mean definitely traditionally the weak point of Ruby Steel is its lack of consistent draw. Doc does
Mm.
indeed fix that. I just don't think it's enough right now. It
Oh no,
could be enough
I was
later.
just saying that's a good note to make that
Yeah,
Doc
yeah. It's
has made
definitely
that a bit
it's
more playable.
improved, but it's gone from like tier 10 to tier 8. You know?
Starter deck level
Yeah.
to, I guess, play this at store champs if
Yeah,
you
you
want to
could win.
laugh.
You could win a
Like,
store champs with this now. I
yeah, I
reckon.
think
Yeah.
so.
But I mean, anything can win a store champs.
Yeah, I've lost faith in them.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Amber Sapphire. I don't know. Have you seen anything that's impressed you with this income?
I like Theo Time's list. I actually, to be honest with you, when I was coming up from EU Continentals, I said I really want to get into this because it was using Alice. And you got like Daisy, and then you play Kida. But I don't know. I just don't see it represented anywhere. It's got no bite back. So like, unlike my Sapphire Steel list that I run with Alice, if I want to like strength something that has to be removed, what can I think that deck's got like Sven that can reset things.
Hmm.
And that's about it. It's got no defensive. You just basically aggro. So
Also,
yeah,
Tim's list, like,
fun.
it wasn't even, it was just a list about playing for a show match of LC3. Like, it's not something they ever plan
Yeah,
to bring to even.
yeah. No, I mean a lot were hiding during that event. I know there are Amber Sapphire players that are quite excited. There is a lot of good cards in that color combo, but you can maybe make a fun aggro
I
deck.
played a
So
really cool
yeah,
princess
fun.
deck in set one. Video did not like it.
Yeah. I think it has morphed
Apparently, a
into
lot
a
of
list.
kids enjoyed my deck, according to their parents.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
You
Because it
met a
had
mover in set
princesses.
one.
It was lovely. Yeah.
Oh god, I've been asked to make a princess deck like every other week. Like, yeah, but I think Amber Sapphire, it's morphing into a color identity with this aggro build. I know Theo did it just for that event, but there are people who generally believe in it, and meh, like, Daisy, Anna, reset with Sven, play Akita. It's a line, I
Yeah.
guess.
I mean, there's some powerful cards in there. It's not doing anything unfair, is the issue. Uh,
Mm.
which, I'm going to bring us to hyper aggro. I'm going to put it at the bottom of unplayable. It always has a chance of winning a tournament. It just needs to line up the right matchup. In the LCQ,
Yeah.
line up the right dice roll and the right matchup. I think it's got the lowest chance it's ever had because of how steel and centric and low to the ground the meta is. Tempo decks typically beat up on aggro decks very, very, very easily. So it's probably the worst chance it's ever had, but it's still got more of a chance than anything fun. Like, I could see one getting the most insane Swiss run ever. Oh, sorry, LCQ run ever and qualifying.
Yeah, it's always been that deck. People said if there's a steel meta, you can't play it. I think that's got even worse because even if it's on the play with cards like Calhoun
Mm.
that can remove and chase the law, like it's got even worse versus the steel matchup. But you could see a guy who's like, oh yeah, I just played 5 Ruby Sapphires in a row and I made cut. Or I made Tay 2. Like how that's not unmanageable. That's happened before. So yeah, if you're a hyper aggro player, good luck. But it must be real rough in a steel meta right now.
And then next up is Emerald Amber. This is a deck that I played in the LC3, not out of choice because it was the last two ink combos left to me by Harlan and Becky. And then I had people in the Twitch chat going, "Why are you playing a bad deck?" Mate, I did not choose to play this deck. I did not want to play this deck. I do not enjoy playing. Actually, I do really enjoy playing this deck. It's just I think it's a terrible choice for the meta. But I put it at the bottom of unplayable, below hype, below below hyper aggro.
I'll let you,
Because I
I'll let
think,
you decide this one.
yeah, I think below hyper aggro specifically because it just does nothing a lot of the time. But occasionally you get these hands and you get these situations where you completely control the board and your opponent never top decks the answer and you win. Actually, maybe I'll put it above hyper aggro.
Give it some
Wait,
respect.
actually, where am I putting these lists? Sorry. I'm going to put hyper aggro. I'm going to swap these around because I don't think these are very
Yeah,
good
I
lists.
think
Yeah,
yeah.
I think we put yellow green at the top of unplayable and then hyper aggro.
Is that top of unplayable almost into rogue, or is that just it's
No,
just
I
the
don't
top
think this
rogue?
is
No.
anywhere near rogue. I don't
Yeah.
think it's close to a tier 2 deck. I think right now it's solidly in tier 3. So
Yeah. I
nothing
mean,
here. And I think this is on the bottom half of unplayable. Like I would be
yeah.
shocked if Emerald Sapphire or Ruby Amber made it into Continentals, like through qualification. Sorry, no, made it into day
Mm,
2 of Continentals. But it's still possible. Whereas these, I'd also be shocked, but I'd be less shocked.
yeah. I think with Amber Emerald is it has one of DLC, and I'll admit, so the game does change each set, but it never changes drastically. Like a lot of the decks are very much like Ruby Sapphire's very much the same as it was. It uses the Maui Shark and stuff now, but yeah. So I think it has the potential, but it's fallen a lot out of
But
favor,
it won a
and it never really
DLC
does great.
under perfect meta conditions. Same
Yeah,
set, but with no Bucky. There's literally, you could not ask for a better meta condition. Because
yeah,
even if Emerald Steel was so good, people didn't have time to find the version of it that was good that people found in the next set. So there was no one playing the deck that best counted.
mm,
But it's
yeah.
still, yeah, right now, even though Emerald Steel wasn't at the top, Amber Steel is. I, I actually think, specifically into the Daisy Duck version, not into mines. You have a terrible time dealing with mines, but into the more mid-rangey version, Emerald Amber has a better chance of Amber Steel.
Yeah, if it's setting up singers and stuff, you can bounce. It won't just race with the law. You
Yeah.
might be able to win that.
But you
Yeah.
just struggle into every other match. For me.
Mm.
This destroys hyper aggro. It's maybe the best deck in the game for hyper aggro. I learned playing against people at local.
Yeah, I could see that with muses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're going to play with muses like that, why not just play Emerald Steel? Because then you can remove them too without needing a big comp.
Yeah, I know what you mean with the Toronto situation. Bucky was gone, people had sort of gone off, and you didn't really want Green Steel versus Amber Emerald. It's not really a matchup you like. So, yeah.
And then finally, we have everyone's die-hard favourite deck, Ruby Amber.
Yeah, which, like,
Yeah, it's
has
in
to be
meta.
meta.
It's in meta. But where in meta, right? Okay,
Um,
downside, right? I think the meta's moved towards steel. Ruby Amethyst has a tough time into green steel, into amber steel, into purple steel, which I think puts it below red, but above green.
I think I would agree with that. The Doc Mines build, it really has a bad time into. Amber Steel just generally it does. I think even Ruby Sapphire, those matchups are getting shored because as they target the lower to the ground stuff, the things that made Ruby Amethyst better
Mm.
into Ruby Sapphire are getting a little bit shored up because they can target the Flins and the Sisus and stuff that's low to the ground. Um, but yeah, it's the powerhouse. I'm gonna stop saying it now because this set was the set I said it's dead, or I was hoping it would die, and then I realized no, it's still always going to be good. It's just
Yeah.
two consistent colors, very consistent cards that are going to be staples for a long time. It's always going to be good. It's always going to be meta.
I mean, what I lost into the LCQ was my teammate in red blue playing a mirror, but they were technically the mirror, and playing against red purple. Which I did brick 2 out of 3 games, but it's also slightly favored into red blue. I think not as much into my version, but it still has its place in the meta because it has the tightest margins of any deck. If there's no deck that instantly beats it, there's also no deck that it instantly beats. So if you pilot it really, really well to close the gap on those margins through player skill, that's where you're going to find your success. That's why players like No, I'm Not do so well.
Yeah, and it's very rare for the deck to brick or have issues. Like most lists run around 12 and Inkables. It just plays a curve for the early parts. Most of its card now like cantrip draw cards, like all of its one drops, its genie, its rabbit. So it just overall doesn't ever do a bad job, but it doesn't do anything broken either. It's not doing anything amazing like discard your entire hand or like Sisu Ice Block or what Amber Steel's doing as well. If it's flooding the boards and daisies, but everything it does a tight, good game. So it's just always going to be meta.
Also, like for the other fair Amethyst decks, Genie just like brought it up a little. Like Genie is just
look at that purple.
Yeah.
Look at that purple representation.
Oh yeah. This is probably more purple
up.
representation than we've ever seen. Like we always see a lot of red purple. But this is the most we've seen of green purple, purple steel, and even a bit of blue, right? Like mid-rangey purple decks have just gotten better thanks to Genie. Thank you, Genie.
It's been good enough to make Blurple actually in the conversation.
Yeah.
Whereas before you'd kind of dismiss it.
It's a joke deck before. Yeah. Like last set. Sorry, everyone at locals who plays Blurple, but last set Blurple was here.
You should clip that and put it on Twitter. That'll get a lot of you. It's a joke deck. Yeah. It was fun. It was sort of like, I'm ramping to a Hades and I bounce an Elsa with a snake, but it didn't win anything and it didn't do very well. But yet now it's like, actually playing a Genie on turn 3, this is really strong.
Yeah, right. Now you actually have something you can ramp into that affects the board early.
Yeah, you're doing something good. So yeah, definitely.
All right, and that's it for the tier list. Soak it in for a second before we switch to webcams. Have a pause, have a look around. If you disagree, please comment all your most negative thoughts because it drives engagement, and we really need to find our audience for the podcast. So much appreciated for all of your negativity. If you have positivity, share it too.
Yeah, just that assumption that it was going to be negative.
Yeah, I think this is controversial. I think people will call me stupid. And I'm happy to take the blame because this was more me pushing for Red Blue to be up here than you.
I think those two are probably the best decks in the game right now. They seem to win everything. So I don't know. I wouldn't disagree with that. Yeah. I think that top 3 is 100% correct. And then everything else people have room to debate on. But
yeah, I think this is your like rock, paper, scissors. This top 3. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, to be fair, they do all sort of go in a circle and can beat each other and then sort of have a fair game into their bad matchup. Yeah, I think those 3 really represent the rock, paper, scissors of Lorcana.
Right, and switching back to full cam, that's been all for today. Thank you for watching Alphos Sweete. You can keep watching the podcast here on my channel, and I still do coaching on Medify if you'd like to get some last-minute practice in. Actually, no, it'll be too late at this point. If you'd like to get some practice in set champs as opposed to NALCQ, which is happening today, then I highly recommend checking that out. Harlan also has a Medify. Harlan, anything else you want to shout out?
Yeah, I got a Medify as well. I did put a set 6 guide for Blue Steel, No Wheel and Wheel because I just did that and it's on there if you want to. Sort of taking a step back from coaching a little bit, so I won't be booking any. But there's guides out there and I'm going to keep posting guides because I quite like doing it.
Yeah, wonderful. All right. Merry Christmas, or in New Zealand, Merry Kirihimete, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, guys.
Which is a couple of weeks late, but I don't think we said it last time, so I'm getting it in now.
I don't know if we did. No,
we didn't. We're actually the Grinch, like bar humbug. Let's talk about Lorcana. Well, it's because we took a break.
That's what the people want.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.